so that Pakistan and India could be embraced within the community of secular nation states. But of course you had to put a little red herring to fool the people. So you have to make it appear as though Pakistan is going to emerge as an Islamic state, but that's just dust in their eyes, to fool those who see with only one eye. And so in 1924, on the 3rd of March, the caliphate was abolished. When the caliphate was abolished, Sharif Hussein realized that he was in grave danger now. So long as there was a Khalifa in Istanbul, the British needed him. But now that the caliphate was destroyed, abolished, Sharif Hussein now realizes the plan. He says, oh my gosh, they're going to send Abdulaziz ibn Saud to cut my throat now. In exactly the same way that Abdullah of Jordan is now realizing, as soon as Bush attacks Iraq, that is the end of me. So Sharif al-Hussein decides 4 days later, on the 7th of March 1924, to claim the Khilafah for himself. But when you're a client state of Britain, you can't do that. You have to first apply to the British government for permission to become the Khalifa. He didn't do that. As soon as Sharif al-Hussein claimed the Khilafat for himself on the 7th of March 1924, you're going to get all of this information in that book which is outside, the Caliphate, the Hijaz, and the Saudi Wahhabi nation state. As soon as he did that, Britain gave the green light to Abdulaziz. Attack. Within 6 months, the Saudi army of Abdulaziz ibn Saud conquered Mecca. And Abdulaziz and Sharif Hussein packed his suitcase and off he went. British took him away. This one the Americans will take out of Jordan. And so Abdulaziz ibn Saud is now in control of Mecca and eventually Medina. It's a Saudi Wahhabi alliance. Does he claim the Khilafah for himself now? No. What he does is, as soon as he enters Mecca in 1924, October, Abdulaziz ibn Saud makes a proclamation, and they're going to hate me for revealing this to you, because nobody remembers it now. The proclamation which he makes is that this land belongs to the entire Ummah. This land belongs to the entire Ummah. I wonder how a Pakistani or a Bengali Muslim will feel when he hears that, and he's been rounded up like dogs, stray dogs, and put on trucks because he's overstayed his visa, while white-skinned Americans and British are treated like princes in the Holy Land. How will a Pakistani or Indian or Bangladeshi feel? This land belongs to the entire Ummah. And it is for the Ummah, not for Abdulaziz ibn Saud, for the Ummah to establish the government which will rule over this land. That is his proclamation in 1924. But in cricket it's called playing for time. He did this because in April of 1924, Al-Azhar University had responded to the Turkish abolition of the Khilafah. What did they do? Al-Azhar University declared that this was bid'ah and haram to abolish the Khilafah. And therefore we must respond to it. And the response of Al-Azhar is that we must have a mu'tamar, a conference, which would meet and which would appoint a new Khalifa. As soon as Al-Azhar issued this proclamation, you could see how Britain was trembling. The British government can't digest their food now. They've got to plan some counter strategy to the initiative of Al-Azhar University. The counter strategy is that Egypt is itself not a free country. It may appear free, but Britain really has control over Egypt. So Britain puts pressure on King Fuad the father of King Farouk. You're too old to hear about, you're too young to know about this. And King Fuad is now putting pressure on Al-Azhar to hold back on this conference. So for 2 years, the conference can't take place. 2 years because of British pressure. The conference finally takes place in June, July of 1926. But Britain uses another counter strategy. She gets Abdulaziz ibn Saud in Mecca to also convene a conference of the world of Islam in Mecca at the time of the Hajj, which is May of 1926. And then Britain and Russia and France and China and all the major powers in Europe all get to work. Massive intervention in the affairs of the world of Islam to ensure that the Cairo conference does not succeed in winning a representative gathering, and that the Mecca conference gets all the Muslims attending it. And they succeeded. The Cairo conference, organized by Al-Azhar University, becomes an essentially Arab conference because non-Arabs are hardly present. The conference met. The conference decided that the Khilafah was an essential part of the deen, that it was bid'ah and haram to abolish it, that the Khilafah must be restored, but we don't know how to do it. So let's go back home and come back after 1 year. That was the decision. We don't know how to do it. But in Mecca, you had the most successful representation of the entire world of Islam, because Britain really went to work on it. This conference is now convened, but strangely for the Wahhabi movement. Strangely for the Wahhabi movement, which is a religious movement, which declares that it is bringing back the original Islam and removing all the extraneous things which had been added and cutting out all the shirk. So this is the real Islam. Well, then how come you don't even have the subject of the Khilafah in your agenda for your conference? We asked the Wahhabi movement, give us an answer. There is no answer. The answer is that the Wahhabi-Saudi alliance is now perpetrating a gigantic, a massive betrayal of Islam in abandoning the Khilafah. And so the conference takes place. But the subject of the Khilafah is not even on the agenda of the conference. Instead, Abdulaziz ibn Saud approaches the conference twice, himself in person. And he asks the conference to recognize him as Al-Malik. That his rule should be recognized over the Hijaz. When the conference had heard His Majesty the King on both occasions, and the conference is now sitting down to discuss the matter, shall we recognize Saudi Wahhabi rule over the Hijaz? The leader of the Indian Muslim delegation jumped up to speak first. He spoke first. His name was Maulana Muhammad Ali Jawhar. He got up and he told the king, get lost. We'll never do that. As soon as the leadership of the Indian Muslim delegation had established its position of rejecting the claim of the Saudi Wahhabi leadership for sovereignty and control over the Hijaz, the rest of the delegates couldn't say, That was the power of a man who knew Islam and lived Islam. And so the conference ended without giving to the Saudi Wahhabi rule over the Hijaz recognition. They decided that they'll meet every year, but that was the last time they ever met. This then was the response of the world of Islam to the abolition of the Khilafah. In 1930, I think, or 31, Hajj Amin al-Hosein in Jerusalem felt that the ominous advance of the Jews in the Holy Land required a response from the world of Islam. So he sought to reconvene the conference in Jerusalem. But it was a new conference. It gave it a new name in 1930 or 31. They call it the Al-Aqsa Conference, or the Mu'tamar al-Am. And this conference also met in 1930-31, but you're meeting to establish Darul Islam in a territory which is under British rule. Nothing could be more foolish than that. How can you restore Darul Islam when you're meeting in a territory which is under British rule? And you have to get permission from the British government to hold your conference. So the conference ended without being able to do anything about it. Since then to this day, there has been no effort, no significant effort on the part of the world of Islam to restore the Khilafah. Why? Simple. Because you cannot restore the Khilafah unless and until you can liberate the Hijaz, Makkah and Medina. You can't do that when the Hijaz, the security of the Hijaz is underwritten by Uncle Sam. What is the replacement of the Khilafah? Around the world, beginning with the secular Republic of Turkey, and then an Iran which resembles a Shia republic, but essentially is a secular republic, and then the secular Republic of Pakistan, which of course has now become the American Republic of Pakistan. And then in 1933, the Republic of Saudi Arabia, but they're parading as a monarchy, but it's actually a secular state, because it has all the trappings of a secular state. A secular state has territorial sovereignty. The state of Saudi Arabia has territorial sovereignty. A secular state has citizenship. Once upon a time when I went to Mecca, I was Muslim. And the only difference between me and my fellow Muslim who was resident in Mecca was that I was Musafir and he was Sakin. Other than that, we're the same. But now, I am a foreigner. If this is not bid'ah, I should change my name. I am now a foreign national, and they are Saudis. And all the oil that Dajjal discovered underneath the soil belongs to them. They own it. So what about Abdulaziz ibn Saud's proclamation that this entire land belongs to the world of Islam? That's forgotten. That's why they hate me for reminding you of these things. The entire world is now embraced, the entire world of Islam is now embraced by the modern secular state. Now let me say to you before I leave Australia, any Muslim, whenever I talk on two subjects, a lot of people now begin to behave strangely towards me. But while it pains my heart, it will not change me, because I do not teach Islam to please people. I try to do it to please my Lord. When I talk on the subject of riba, some people begin to hate me. Yeah, it doesn't matter. When I talk on this subject also, when a Muslim pledges his allegiance to the modern secular state and to its constitution, which declares that Allah is no longer Al-Malik, no longer Al-Akbar, no longer Al-Hakam. The state is now Al-Malik, Al-Akbar, and Al-Hakam. And the state can make halal what Allah made haram. When a Muslim pledges his allegiance, and you've got to do that to get citizenship. Oh yeah. Can't get a US passport without pledging allegiance. When you do that, you commit shirk. If you don't believe me, no problem, no problem. When you reach the grave, then you'll see. When a Muslim goes and votes in the elections to constitute the government which will preside over this shirk, you enter into shirk. But if you don't believe me and you want to go and vote in the elections, I am not stopping you. So don't let there be any bad blood between us. I'm not stopping you. But when you enter in the grave and you find that you've entered into shirk, do not plead ignorance, that's all. Stand up like a man and take it on that day. This is now the universal shirk that the Prophet ﷺ had prophesied. He said the time would come when shirk will be everywhere, it'll be so difficult to recognize it. However, as difficult as it would be to recognize a black ant on a black stone on a dark night. So if you did not recognize it before this lecture, don't be surprised, but now you know. This universal secular state is now used to embrace all of mankind, including the world of Islam, in political globalization. So that eventually you have one government over all of mankind. Eventually the Jews will now rule the world using that structure. That's about to happen. We already made significant progress towards that day. When you read this book, Jerusalem in the Quran, which I believe is the first and only book on the subject, because you couldn't write this book before 1948. Nobody could write it before 1948. Not in 1400 years of this history. In fact, it was difficult to write this book in 1948. It's easy to write it now, but difficult to write it at that time. When you read this book, then you'll understand why it is, I say, that we are now located at that moment in time when one ruling state is about to give way to another. That the state of Israel is about to replace the United States as the ruling state in the world. When Israel takes over from the United States with that big war which is about to take place, and the American economy collapses and the US dollar collapses and all the paper money in the world collapses, and this is going to be my lecture next Wednesday, inshallah, on Islam and the international monetary system, please come to it. Then we see that transfer of power. Israel takes control of the oil, for example, of the Middle East. When Israel becomes the ruling state in the world, then the Jews will say, the golden age has come again. The prophecy is being fulfilled. But they're being deceived in the grandest and most magnificent deception mankind has ever witnessed. No, this is not the golden age. You've been deceived by Al-Masih ad-Dajjal. Israel will rule the world for a day which is like a week. If you disagree with me, you say, we never heard this before. Our sheikhs who taught us Islam, they never talked about this, so you must be wrong. My response is wait and see. That's all. I don't have to say anything more than that. How long will a day which is like a week last? How long? How long will Israel rule the world? And what will be our predicament during that time? This is what I spoke about last night. You cannot establish Islam at the macro level, so go ahead and establish at the micro level. The jihad is already in force to liberate the Holy Land. No one can stop that jihad. No one can stop it. The jihad is already in force to liberate the territory from where the army will come, from Khorasan. No one can stop that jihad. When you see that army coming from Khorasan, the Prophet said, go and join that army, even if you have to crawl over ice. Because no one will be able to stop that army until it reaches Jerusalem. When a day which is like a week has come to an end, and we will know that because the water in the Sea of Galilee would have dried up. That is the time when these events are now going to take place. The advent of Imam al-Mahdi, Dajjal appearing in a day which is like our day, so we'll see him as a Jew, etc., and the Son of Mary coming down. There are some of you who have become a bit uncomfortable with my statement that I said it would be perhaps within the next 50 years. And I went on to say, I can be wrong. If this statement is uncomfortable to you, I can make another statement which means exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. I can say that I expect the Sea of Galilee to dry up in about 50 years. I hope you'd have no objections to that. Huh? But it's the same thing. Because it is when the water in the Sea of Galilee dries up